Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon of Savage Reads, and today I am back with my penultimate video of the year, my top non-fiction books of 2020. There's 10 of them. I'm very excited. Admittedly, I was going to try and sort of combine all of my favourite fiction non-fiction, but it was just too difficult. And I also thought that in the bin fire of 2020, it would be nice to bring out, which is slightly Alanis Morissette level ironic, as much joy out of 2020 as I could at the end of it. So 10 non-fiction books today, 15 fiction books tomorrow. And if you want even more, I have done an honorary mentions video on my Patreon page, which I'll link down below. Right, let's get cracking with the non-fiction. Honestly, I love this time of year because you get everyone's favourites over the next week or so, and then you also get everyone's excitement for the new year. And I think that's what we read. Well, it is what we read, hopefully. But it's what we need right now. I'm always thinking about books. Can't say any word that rhymes with read without saying read. Anyway, let's get cracking with these books because I could go off on tangents for hours, as you all know. So, in at number 10, as if I'm like doing top of the pops, which is very exciting, is a book that I came to later in the year, and that is Hangary by Grace Dent. Now, I've known of Grace Dent through Chris, who is one of her biggest fans, and I've learnt the feeling is mutual. She absolutely loves him because I met her earlier this year when she came on Scarlett's Book Club Live, which is why I ended up reading this. Now, it would have been on my periphery anyway because of Chris, but I might not have got to it as soon, and I'm so glad I did because I absolutely loved this. This has such a wry humour to it for a memoir that looks at working class life. It looks at food for a family who couldn't afford like the gastronomic wonders that some families might. So it's actually a celebration of things like Finder's crispy pancakes, Angel Delight, butterscotch flavour, always the best, which I have to say might not translate to people who watch this channel here, there and everywhere, and also might appeal to a specific age group. But for me, this chimes so much with me. But also what I really loved about it, I just love the way Grace encapsulates and writes about family life, the love of her family, the love of her parents, and also that kind of working class humour and wanting to be a little bit better but not wanting to get too above yourself and all those kind of things. And it was just a real treat, pun intended, to read. So yeah, I would really recommend you get this. And I don't think it matters if you know Grace Dent or not, although those of you who may know her, there's a delicious pun intended again, irony to this book in the fact that she's so celebratory of all of those sort of what was seen as bad for you foods or quick and easy meals, and now she is a restaurant critic. And actually on Instagram the other day, she had a very fancy pudding with some custard on it, and I said, I hope that's cold custard, to which she replied, "Begone Satan, I love cold custard on a warm pudding." Anyway, love this book as much actually as I love cold custard on a warm pudding. There, I can't say more. In fact, I love it as much as Angel Delight butterscotch flavour. So there we go. Then a non-fiction book that I read earlier in the year and listened to on audio and really got a lot out of that is On the Red Hill by Mike Parker, who reads the memoir. Now, this is about him and his partner who were at the first gay wedding in Wales, and they were the witnesses because they'd come to know this other gay couple who had been living together for decades and decades, way before it became legal to be homosexual in the UK. And it's just one of the most beautiful books about a social commentary on queer life and queer history and the queer movement. But also what I love is the focus is so often on cities and the sort of queer life in cities and nightclubs and all that kind of thing. And this isn't. This is about countryside. This is about two men who fell in love and created this beautiful idyll which became a B&B. And actually, well, they had quite a few different B&Bs and moved around, but created this, well, it's an idyllic life, but also we see the fractures in it. We see how that relationship was. We also learn about Mike and his partner as they take over the place when they inherit it. And so it's got all those sort of things that I love. That queer commentary, that queer history. There's nature in this book. Human nature, love, loss, jealousy, the whole spectrum of emotions. It's just wonderful. So I cannot recommend you get to this. I mean, I'm going to say that for everyone, aren't they? They're my favourite non-fiction books of the year. Now, another memoir that I listened to, although actually I suppose Mike's is memoir and social history, but this memoir I listened to on audio as well, and I found this so moving. And I've read it quite recently, so I think this is going to be one that still keeps growing on me. And that is My Name Is Why by Lem Sissay, which I so wish I'd read so much sooner, because I wish I'd kind of been one of those first people to be able to shout about it, because it's that brilliant. And actually there's a couple of books that I feel like that about, both in non-fiction and fiction this year, so that teaches me a lesson. So anyway, this is Lem's story, which when you get it on audio, you hear, and it looks at how when he was in his teens, he managed to get the records of his childhood and found out his name wasn't his name. And he found out the true story about his mother and all these things. He actually had to take the government to court in order to get all of this to happen. So really, really like a proper pioneer, advocate, activist on like social care. And we also get the true story of his childhood in foster care, and it is heartbreaking. And you get Lem's memories and also sort of the hindsight that he has all at once, which I think is really powerful. And also you get inserts of the reports from the social workers. And honestly, this is such a heartbreaking, haunting, yet so much about the internal strengths and courage we can have, and the fact that we can change things and we can make things happen and better, not just for ourselves but for everyone. In fact, actually we can't always make everything better, but we can try and get to a better place, I guess. And also looks at how Lem's creativity helped him and all those things. It's just brilliant. I can't recommend it enough. I think everybody needs to read or listen to this, as I do. In The Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I was just going to call it Her Body and Other Parties, which is the short story collection of Carmen Maria Machado's that I read a few years ago, which is also brilliant. This, I've never read anything quite like it, and I think what she does with this memoir is fantastic. So this is quite a difficult subject matter. This is about a relationship that becomes abusive mentally and physically, and what Carmen Maria Machado does is almost, I don't know whether it's intentional, actually, this is me putting this on it, but I felt like she tries to almost create fictional versions of it, so she just has that bit of distance to overlook it, and yet the raw emotion is still there. And I say that because each different chapter, I guess, of the book is kind of a different genre. So you have Dream House's erotica, Dream House's omen, then you'll get Dream House's noir, Dream House's queer villainy, or Dream House's utopia, Dream House's doppelganger. And they're these relatively short vignettes, some might be 3 or 4 pages to be fair, of these snapshot moments. And I just think it's so brilliantly done, and like I said, not quite like anything I have read before. So yeah, amazing. I was going to say would recommend it, but that's a given because it's my favourite non-fiction books of the year. Then we have, I think we're almost halfway, Natalie Haynes' Pandora's Jar, which, how stunning is that? I loved 2 Natalie Haynes books this year. 1,000 Splendid, I always keep calling it 1,000 Splendid Ships. It's not, it's 1,000 Ships. Come on, Simon, don't get your titles confused. You're meant to know what you're talking about. What I decided to do was, if I had read, I wanted to have in my top however many books of the year, I only wanted to have an author once, even if I've read books both non-fiction or fiction, or I might have read a YA book and an adult fiction or whatever. So some of those books, like 1,000 Ships, I've given you an extra one for free, are in the honorary mentions that I mentioned. Anyway, the reason I brought that up is because the 2 books really, really sing to each other, in the fact that 1,000 Ships is Natalie's fictional account of, well, I know that the Trojan War is fictional, but because I was brought up on classics so much because of my mum, I always kind of still think in my head partly they're real. Like when I was in Cyprus, I was messaging going, "I'm where Aphrodite was born." She's like, "Well, you're not really, are you though?" Which I find a bit ruinous, because you should want to feel like they're real. Anyway, I digress massively. So 1,000 Ships is the Trojan War told through the perspective, or retold through the perspective of only women, by Natalie, and it is brilliant. And some of these women feature here too, and I loved that. And actually I would really, really recommend not necessarily reading them one after the other, but reading them within maybe 6 months of each other, because they do, like I say, sing to each other, and you have this sort of it's never academic, but Natalie is a classicist, and so that is there, that sort of what's the word I want to use, that proper, confident, well, more importantly, it's got that real genuine enthusiasm and passion for it. And she does give voice to these women who have been silenced, these statues who have just literally been statues. There's been no real backstory to them, really, apart from at the behest of men, be they mythical, godly, or real, back in the day, or even now, because misogyny is rife in classics. Anyway, I just think she does a phenomenal job with this, and all of her expertise, that's the word I want to say, all of her expertise, all of her enthusiasm and her love is poured into this. So really recommend you get to it. I've done it again, I keep saying it. Then, and I read 2 books by this author, and both of them, sorry, this writer, and both of them could have been in my top 10 if I'd been allowing myself more than one book by one author, is Claudia Rankine, and this is Citizen, which is an American lyric. And here it's sort of written in verse, but also very much like vignettes, and I love a vignette. And these different vignettes that you get will often be really small, slight incidences of everyday racism that Black people hear or have said at them, or the different ways of face. And what she does is she looks at different things like sport, particularly tennis, because she uses Serena Williams as an example, and how culture has sort of, or how Black culture has been perceived within culture because it's been separated. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what it felt to me, and it showed how sort of how ingrained racism is, and how it can be, people can say things and they don't even hear how racist they are, and I just thought it was incredibly powerful. I have the final I think they're meant to be a loose trilogy, An American Conversation, just us to read next year. I was going to try and squeeze it in this year, but I decided no, I'm going to save that for next year, because I just know it's going to be another one that I just am completely bowled over by, and I'm looking forward to reading much more of her work. And I would like to get some of her poetry as well. I don't know how easy it is to get hold of. Now then, amazingly, we're at my 4th favourite non-fiction of the year, and it's from one of my favourite things that has happened in 2020, which is the book club that I started with Melanie Sykes. We did not know each other before we started it. We had a mutual friend, and we have become really good mates through it, and it has been a real joy throughout the pandemic to chat to Mel about books, but also chat about everything off camera, and just so all of the books that we read for book club, some that were less successful, are still some of my favourite memories of the year. This is particularly powerful, although it's not the only non-fiction book that we've read that features in this list. And this is I'm an Island by Tamsin Kalidas. Now, I wouldn't have read this if Melanie hadn't chosen it, because I hadn't even heard of it. And this is about Tamsin, who had a really successful career in London. However, things happened, really uncomfortable things. Actually, from the beginning, this book is menacing. That is one word that I would say sort of sums up this book, menacing overall. But there are several incidents that happen that mean that her and her husband decide to leave London and get a croft on the Scottish Isles, and try and become crofters and live out there on the islands. And it is about how they are received there, the harshness of nature, how their relationship starts to fracture, and various traumas post the trauma in London that happen to Tamsin from there. And it's one of those books where part of me is thinking, God, this is relentless, really relentless. But also, again, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's about that core strength we have within us, and how Tamsin carries on, and how, there are points where she may not want to carry on, and there's a whole thing around that in this book. But I just came away from it having... And it's interesting, Melanie said this, but you read this almost like you would read a horror book. There are moments you're reading this and you are scared for her. You're so uncomfortable. And you can't, if this was a fiction book, I would have found it hard to believe it was real. I just, honestly, phenomenal, because as the book goes on, this hope does come to the fore. But it is quite relentless at points, but I just think all the more powerful by the end because of that. So would highly recommend it. I don't know if I've said that enough with this video. Now I listened to this on audiobook back at the beginning of the year when I was in a different job, which seems like decades ago because of 2020 and the year it's been. I remember listening to this while sorting out stock in a cupboard for about 6 hours one day, and I'm so glad that I had this in my ears. And that is How We Fight for Our Lives by Saeed Jones, and this is his memoir growing up as a black queer man in America, about wanting to get his education, having to deal with how his blackness was perceived and fetishized as he grew up. It's also very much about how his family felt about certain things. It's a real love letter to his mother, and it's just wonderful. And I really, really want to read his poetry actually as well. And having him read it, I think, made it all the more powerful. And there's such a fascinating account and look at fetishization of black people and white people and vice versa, or black people of white people and white people of black people within the queer community. I found that really, really quite compelling and confronting actually. So yeah, it's just, phenomenal is probably the only word I can really use for it. And at the beginning of the year, I was pretty sure this was going to be my favourite non-fiction book of the year. However, 2 books have come along since and just knocked it off. But I can't recommend. I'll say it again. Can't recommend it enough. I should have said it's a drinking game. Maybe have a drink alcoholic shots ready for. Maybe have alcoholic shots. Doesn't come any other way. Maybe have alcoholic shots or just shots of like apple juice or fizzy pop if you don't drink like me, ready for tomorrow's fiction books of the year, and you can play a drinking game as you go for New Year's Eve. How apt. Anyway, on to the final 2, the first of which is very, very short, sharp pocketbook of power. I've described this. This is How to Stay Sane in an Age of Division by Elif Shafak. And this book came at just the right moment and is so powerful in what it does in such a short space of time. This book looks at the state of the world right now. It encompasses the pandemic, which in some ways is very raw and almost too raw. And I talk about that in my honorary mentions with some other books. But this chimed in a powerful, hopeful way, because what Elif Shafak does with this is look at various different states of emotions around what's going on in the world. So anger, and how you can use anger in a powerful way but not a violent way. Also the power of silence, and how sometimes it's better to be quiet and listen, but also how, and I think this is one of the really important things that comes out of this book, how we need to stop cancelling other people and start trying to discuss with other people. It's got very shouty. It all feels very shouty, and that isn't working. I just think Twitter has now become somewhere where people just shout all the time, and that's kind of it, and which is a shame because I used to really love it. But I'm wanting to do also, and that's what this book is very much about, is kind of taking control of it and taking back the power we have within it. So it's my choice to listen to the shouty stuff. I can mute that, although actually it's really important to listen to listen to opposing thoughts, because if we don't hear them, how can we counter them, or how can we argue against them? But also we need to take control and use our social media as a powerful positive thing. And it looks at apathy and anxiety in fascinating ways, and how in this anxious world where we are all feeling more anxious all the time, be it because of the pandemic, be it because of politics, be it because of money, be it because of all those different things, one, other people are feeling it too, so don't feel so alone. But 2, we need to let these feelings happen, but again, use that anxiety, acknowledge it, and work from it. And also the big important one is to not let apathy get us, and not let anxiety turn into apathy, or anger turn into apathy because we don't feel like we're doing enough, or we feel like we can't do anything. So yeah, as you can see, a powerful pocket book. I just think it is utterly brilliant and like essential reading for everyone. If I could give everyone a book in the world this year, it would possibly be this one, or the one book that I wish would be in every single library, and that everyone between the ages of, 14 to 20 has to read. It would be, and actually everyone has to read, because I think this is the sort of book that will resonate with people of that age, will make them more open and aware of either their own feelings or other people's feelings, and I think that needs to actually happen across the board. So basically everyone needs to read this too. Life as a Unicorn by Al-Kadhi, which I read for the book club that I do with Melanie Sykes. This was my choice. And it's a book that I'd meant to read for ages. And again, it's one of those books, I'm really cross I didn't read it the moment the proof arrived through the door, because I wish I'd been one of those people shouting about it straight away. But I'm shouting about it now. Well, I'm not shouting about it, as Elif has taught me. I'm just very happily discussing it with you. But I just think this is phenomenal. This is their account of growing up queer and Muslim, how their family reacted to that, how they felt their family would react to that and then did react to that, but also how they sort of took it, how they tried to create the perfect self in order to hide any possible weaknesses or difference or any of those things, or difference seen as weakness. And for anyone queer growing up, I think this is really important reading. I think it's really important just for everyone full stop. And there's so much in here that I love. Like it's a proper warts and all account. Like there is no glamorizing, which is ironic because Amru's drag name is Glamry. But there is no glamorizing of or glamorizing themselves or sugarcoating anything. It's very frank, it's very honest, it's very direct. And for all those things, I loved it all the more. I loved the fact that it looks at marine biology, which I wasn't expecting it to, and also philosophy in some ways. And yeah, I just think this is an absolutely phenomenal book and one that everyone needs to read. So I think that's a perfect note to end my first favourite books of the year video on. So I would love you to let me know in the comments down below what your favourite non-fiction books have been this year, because I'd love to read more next year. It hasn't been my best non-fiction year. I had a really, sorry, that's not right. They've been amazing books, but in terms of the amount of non-fiction I've read, it's not been my best year. I had such a corking year last year, and this year it seemed to be less so. And I wonder if that's just because with everything going on and the amount of news I was intaking, and actually had to wean myself off, reading non-fiction felt like not similar because it's very different subject matter, but I don't know, I needed the escape of fiction, I guess. But when I did read powerful non-fiction, it was super duper powerful, as all of those 10 books were, and a couple more in my honourable mentions. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of those books as well and what your thoughts on those were, and I will see you tomorrow, hopefully with better lighting. I can't believe it's like literally 2 o'clock and it is so dark here. It is untrue. Grim and grey. Anyway, enough of that weather report from me. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.